What is today Latin America was once many native nations. Spain, Portugal, France, England, the Dutch, and Danish invaded. They carried out genocide after genocide and enslaved both natives and Africans. After independence, most new governments were still white-dominated, with more genocides against natives in nations like Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. European powers hold on to some territories even today, and kept invading to take their colonies back. The United States invaded too, overthrowing or trying to overthrow over 60 governments, the last attempt in the year 2020 in Venezuela. The U.S. also took half of Mexico's land and a tenth of its people, and then Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. There is a long history of many Americans fearing and hating Latinos. Latin America's image and reality is often one of instability, poverty, drug cartels, revolutions, corruption, and refugees. But it did not have to be this way. Latin America could remain all or mostly native nations. I spoke about this in detail in the previous series, What If Natives Won? Poverty, white domination, and foreign invasions could have been stopped, prevented, or limited. The U.S. could have been more Latino culturally, with higher numbers of Latinos. The U.S. could have been less racist, less dominating, or the U.S. could be defeated. Some Latin American nations could even become regional or world powers. There is a huge lack of alternate history about Latin America and Latinos. So much alternate history is Europe-centered, mostly because so much history and history teaching is Europe-centered. This series is dedicated to scenarios, points of departure, and possibilities of Latin American victory within Latin America, and a more Latino, or less racist, American society. My name is Al Carroll. I'm Associate Professor of History at Northern Virginia Community College. I've written mostly about wars, veterans, human rights, and genocide. My next history book will be Genocide Denial in America, about the 7 genocides against indigenous people that took place in the U.S. that most people were never taught about, don't know, or deny. I've also written some science fiction, mostly alternate history. One story, Timely Saviors, appeared in the short story collection, The Witness Paradox. I'm also, together with Rob Schmidt of Blue Corn Comics, editing and putting out a short story alternate history collection, What If Natives Won? Or Killing Columbus. I've also written a sci-fi alternate history book, The Man in Black, the first of a series. Losing half of its territory and a tenth of its people was the worst thing that ever happened to Mexico. It is the trauma which defines the nation. It also defines the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico. Mexico is often said to be so far from God and so close to the U.S. The U.S. becomes Satan in this metaphor, supremely powerful and evil. Sometimes having the U.S. as a neighbor is claimed to be like sharing a bed with an elephant. Even if the elephant is good-tempered, you are always worried about it because of its size and power. The way to prevent this unequal relationship is to keep them more equal. Keep Mexico and the U.S. close to equal in size, territory, and the number of people, and wealth and power. In 1845, Mexico was actually larger in territory by over 1 million square miles. Mexico also had nearly 3/4 the population of the U.S. at the time. One way to stop this is to defeat the white American pro-slavery uprising in Texas. This is what the last video and an earlier video in What If Natives Won discussed. Comanches and Germans could defeat the American insurgents. Karl Marx might even lead it. A slave revolt could stop this pro-slavery uprising, or the insurgent militia could lose at San Jacinto. Even if the insurgents hold on against all odds, war with Mexico can still be avoided. Texas and California could become colonies of the British Empire in the 1840s. Texas leader Sam Houston, in fact, did propose that Texas become a British colony. It was at that point that a pair of pro-slavery presidents in the U.S., Tyler and then Polk, pushed for Texas to become a U.S. slave state. Polk provoked a war with Mexico and sent U.S. troops into Mexico's territory. But if the British accepted Texas as a colony, most of the border between U.S. and Mexico is now separated by the British. There were also rumors at the time that the British wanted to take California as a payment for debts that Mexico owed British banks. If both sides did this, then the only border between the U.S. and Mexico is desert, in what is today Nevada and Utah. War between the U.S. and Mexico is even less likely. If the British hold on to Oregon Territory, the U.S. will never have a Pacific coast, Hawaii or Alaska. California and Oregon at some point become their own nation, independent in the 20th century, much like Canada. There will be no California Indian genocide. The gold rush benefits California, but not the U.S. Hollywood and Silicon Valley don't enrich the U.S. Texas, as a new British colony, will have to give up slavery, already abolished in the British Empire in 1834. For a labor force, Texas plantation owners will have to do what British ones did in the Caribbean, bring in laborers from India. That means Texas will eventually be an independent nation, but with many Hindus and Muslims. There are many Hindus and Muslims in Texas in recent years. Houston has almost 36 mosques. It also has a Mahatma Gandhi district. One final way to keep the U.S. Mexico War from happening is by having a different U.S. president. President John Tyler was almost accidentally killed by an explosion on the USS Princeton in 1844. Shrapnel flew past his head. A few inches over, and he dies. Tyler had been the vice president for William Harrison, who died of pneumonia a month after inauguration. And Tyler didn't bother to appoint another vice president. So Senator Willie Mangum is next in line to succeed him. He is from the opposition, the Whig Party, which is mostly abolitionist, and opposes taking Texas or war with Mexico. The pro-slavery, pro-war, pro-imperialism president James Polk could also lose the election of 1844. In our own time, he won by only a point and a half, less than 40,000 votes. If his opponent, Henry Clay, wins, he opposed war with Mexico. The main abolitionist party, the Whigs, was founded by Clay. Clay's reputation was as the great compromiser, a masterful deal-maker. A war won't happen for at least 4 years, maybe 8. Time enough for Mexico to become stronger and take back Texas from its pro-slavery insurgents and illegal American immigrants. With no more slave states to take further west, the U.S. may go to war to take Cuba from Spain, or there could be an earlier U.S. Civil War. The U.S. today would be 2/3 of its size, both in territory and its economy, and in its population. Mexico would double its current size and be 1/3 larger in population. Its economy might be doubled or even more without the constant instability, exploitation, and domination from the north. This is the end of the 13th video. Please repost freely, like, quote, and comment. This has been Latin American Victory. Next time we will discuss what if there was a U.S. state called Pico in Southern California.